The Old House by Hans Christian Andersen. A very old house stood once in a street where several were quite new and clean. The date of its erection had been graved on one of the beams, and surrounded by scrolls formed of tulips and hope tendrils. By this date it could be seen that the old house was nearly 300 years old. Verses 2 were written over windows in old-fashioned letters, and grotesque faces, closely graved, grinned at you form and under the chronics. One story projected a long way over the other, and on the roof ran a lead gutter. The dragon's head and the end. A wren was intended to pour out of the dragon's mouth, but it ran out of his body instead. Where was a hole in the gutter? The other houses in the street were new and well built, with large window panes and smooth walls. Anyone could see they had nothing to do with the old house. Perhaps they thought, how long will that heap of rubbish remain here to be a disgrace to our old street? The projects are far forward, but no one can see out of our windows what is going on in that direction. The stairs are as broad as the staircase of a castle, and as steep as if they led to a church tower. The iron looks like the gate of a cemetery, and there are brass knobs upon it. It is really too ridiculous. Opposite to the old house were more nice new houses, which had just the same opinion as their neighbors. At the window of one of them sat a little boy with fresh rosy cheeks and clear sparkling eyes, who was very fond of the old house in sunshine or in moonlight. He would sit and look at the wall from which the plaster had in some places fallen off, and fancy all sorts of scenes which had been in former times. How the street must have looked in the house, and all gable roofs, open staircases, and gutters with dragons at his boat. He could even see soldiers walking about with helmets. Certainly it was a very good house to look at for amusement. An old man lived in it, who wore knee-breeched, a coat with large brass buttons, and a wig which anyone could see was a real wig. Every morning an old man came to clean the rooms and raid upon them. Otherwise the old man in knee-breeches would have been quite alone in the house. Sometimes he came to one of the windows and looked out. When the little boy nodded to him, and the old man nodded back again, till they became acquaintance and were friends, although they had never spoken to each other, but it was of no consequence. The little boy one day heard his parents say, "The old man opposite is very well off, but is terribly lonely." The next Sunday morning the little boy wrapped something in a piece of paper and took it to the door of the old house and said to the attendant who waited upon the old man, "Will you please give this from me to the gentleman who lives here? I have 2 tin soldiers, and this is one of them. He shall have him, because I know he is terribly lonely." And the old attendant nodded and looked very pleased, and when he carried the thin soldier into the house. Afterwards he was sent over to ask the little boy if he would not like to pay a visit himself. His parents gave him permission, and so it was that he gained admission to the old house. The brassy knobs on the railing showed were brightly red ever, as if they had been polished on account of his visit, and on the door were carved trumpets standing in tune, and it seemed as if they were blowing with all their might their chicks, and rather puffed out, "Tan-tarara, the little boy is coming! Tan-tarara, the little boy is coming!" When the door opened, all around the hall hung old portraits of knights in armor and ladies in silk gauze, and the armor rattled and the silk dress rustled. Then came a staircase, which went up a long way, and then came down a little way, and led to a balcony, which was in a very ruinous state. There were large holes and long cracks, out of which grew grass and leaves. Indeed, the whole balcony, the courtyard, and the walls were so overgrown with green that they looked like a garden. On the balcony stood flower pots, in which were heat-heft assets' ears, but the flowers in them grew just as they pleased. And one were pink, and growing all over the sides, at least the green leaves were shooted through stern and steam, and saying as plainly as they could speak, "The year has fainted me, the sun has kissed me, and I am promised a little flower for next Sunday, really for next Sunday." When we entered the room in which the walls were covered with leather, and the leather had golden flowers stamped upon it, gilded with fate and damp weather, to endure there is nothing like leather. sate on wards, chairs handsomely carved with elbows on each side, and with very high backs stood in the room, and as they creaked they seemed to say, "Sit down. Oh dear, how I am creaking. I shall certainly have a goat like the old couple. Goat in my bag, oh." And when the little boy entered the room where the old man sat, "Thank you for the tin soldier, my little friend," said the old man, "and thank you also for coming to see me." Thanks, or creak, creak, said all the furniture. There was so much that the pieces of furniture stood in each other's way to get a sight of a little boy. On the wall near the center of the room hung the picture of a beautiful lady, young and gay, dressed in the fashion of the olden times, with powdered hair and a full stiff skirt. She said neither thanks nor creak, but she looked down upon the little boy with mild eyes, and when he said to the old man, "Where did you get that picture?" "From the shop opposite," he replied. "Many portraits hang there, but none seem to trouble themselves about. The person they represent had been dead and buried long since. But I knew this lady many years ago, and she has been dead nearly half a century." Under a glass in the picture hung a nosegay of red flowers, which I now looked half a century old too. At least they appeared so. And the pendulum of the old clock went to and fro, and the hands turned round, and as time passed on, everything in the room grew older, but no one seemed to notice it. "They say at home," said the little boy, "that you are very lonely." "Oh," replied the old man, "I have pleasant thoughts of all that has passed, recalled by memory, and now you are come to visit me, and that is very pleasant." When he took from the bookcase a book full of pictures representing long processions of wonderful coaches, such as are never seen at the present time, soldiers like the Knave of Cups, and citizens with waving banners. The tailor set a flag with a pair of scissors supported by two lions, and on the shoemaker's flag there were no boots, but an eagle with two heads. The shoemaker must have everything arranged so that we can say, "This is a pair." What a picture book it was! And when the old man went into another room to fetch apples and nuts, it was very pleasant, certainly, to be in that old house. "I cannot endure it," said the thin soldier, who stood on the shelf. "It is so lonely and dirty. I've been accustomed to life and a family, and I cannot get used to this life. I cannot bear it. The whole day is long enough, but the evening is longer. It is not here like it was in your house opposite, where your father and mamma talked so cheerfully together, while you and all the dear children made such a delightful noise. Now it is all lonely here in the old man's house. Do you think he gets any kisses? Do you think he ever has friendly looks or a Christmas tree? He will have nothing now but the grave. Oh, I cannot bear it." "You must not look only on the sorrowful side," said the little boy. "I think everything in this house is beautiful, and all the old pleasant thoughts came back here to pay visits." "Ah, but I never see any, and I don't know him," said the tin soldier, "and I cannot bear it." "You must bear it," said the little boy. When the old man came back with a pleasant face, and brought with him beautiful pursed fruits, as well as apples and nuts, and the little boy thought no more of the tin soldier. How happy and delightful the little boy was! And after he returned home, and where days and weeks passed, a great deal of nodding took place from one house to the other, and then the little boy went to pay another visit. The calf trumpeters blew, "Ta-ta-ra-ra." There's the little boy, "Ta-ta-ra-ra." The swords and armor of the old knight's pictures rattled, the silk dresses rustled, the lever repeated its rhyme, and the old chairs had the goat of their backs and cried, "Creak!" It was all exactly like the first time. For in that house, one day and 1 hour were just like another. "I cannot bear it any longer," said the tin soldier. "I have wept tears of tin. It is so melancholy here. Let me go to the wars and lose an arm or a leg. It would be some change. I cannot bear it. Now I know what it is to have visits from one's old recollections, and all I bring with them. I have had visits from mine, and you may believe me, it is not altogether pleasant. It was very nearly jumped from a shelf. I saw you all in your house opposite, as if you were really present. It was Sunday morning, and you children stood round the table, singing the hymn that you sing every morning. You were standing quietly with your hands folded, and your father and mother. You were standing quietly with your hands folded, and your father and mother were looking just as serious. and when the door opened and your little sister Maria, who was not 2 years old, was brought into the room. You know she always danced when she heard music and singing of any sort. So she began to dance immediately, although she ought not to have done so, but she could not get it at the right time because the tune was so slow. So she stood first on one leg and then on the other, and bent her head very low, but it would not suit the music. You stood looking very grave, although it was very difficult to do so. But I laughed so to myself that I fell down from the table with a bruise, which is still there. I know it was not right to laugh, so all this and everything else that I have seen kept running in my head, and these must be the old recollections that bring so many thoughts with them. Tell me whether you still sing on Sundays, and tell me about your little sister Maria, and how my old comrade is the other tin soldier. And really he must be very happy. I cannot endure his life. You are given away, said the little boy. You must stay. Don't you see it? And the old man came in, with a box containing many curious things to show them. Rich pots, scant boxes, and old cards, so large and so richly gilded that no one are ever seen like them in these days. And there were smaller boxes to look at, and the pianos opened, and inside the lid were painted landscapes. But when the old man played, the piano sounded quite out of tune. When he looked at the picture he had bought at the broker's, and his eyes sparkled brightly as he nodded at it and said, "Ah, she could sing the tune." "I will go to the wars, I will go to the wars," cried the tin soldier as loud as he could, and threw himself down on the floor. Where could he have fallen? The old man stretched, and the little boy switched, but he was gone and could not be found. "I shall find him again," said the old man. But he did not find him. The boards of the floor were open and full of holes. The tin soldier had fallen through a crack between the boards, and lay there now in an open grave. The day went by, and the little boy returned home. A week passed, and many more weeks. It was winter, and the windows were quite frozen, so the little boy was obliged to breathe on the panes and rub a hole to peep through at the old house. Snowdrifts were lying in all the screens, and on the inscriptions, and the steps were covered with snow, as if no one were at home. And indeed nobody was home, for the old man was dead. In the evening a hearse stopped at the door, and the old man in his coffin was placed in it. He was to be taken to the country, to be buried there in his own grave. So they carried him away. No one followed him, for all his friends were dead. And the little boy kissed his hand to the coffin as the hearse moved away with it. A few days after, there was an auction at the old house, and from his window the little boy saw the people carrying away the pictures of old knights and ladies, the flower pots with the long ears, the old chairs, and the cupboards. Some were taken one way, some another. A portrait which had been bought at the picture dealer's went back again to his shop, and there it remained, for no one seemed to know her or to care for the old picture. In the spring we began to pull the house itself down. People called it complete rubbish. On the street could be seen the room in which the walls were covered with leather, ragged and torn, and the green in the balcony hung straggled over the beams. They pulled it down quickly, for it looked ready to fall, and at last it was cleared away altogether. "What a good riddance," said the neighbor's house. Very shortly a fine new house was built farther back from the road. It had lofty windows and smooth walls, but in front of the spot where the old house really stood, a little garden was planted, and wild vines grew up over rainbowing walls. In front of the garden were large iron railings and a great gate, which looked very stately. People used to stop and peep through the railings. The sparrows assembled in dozens upon the wild vines, and chattered all together as loud as they could, but not about the old house. None of them could remember it, for many years had passed by. So many indeed that the little boy was now a man, and a really good man too, and his parents were very proud of him. He was just married, and had come with his young wife to reside in the new house with a garden in front of it. And now he stood there by her side, where she planted a field flower which she thought very pretty. She was planting it herself with her little hands, and pressed down the earth with her fingers. "Oh dear, what was that?" she exclaimed, as something pricked her. Out of the soft earth something was sticking up. It was, only think, It was really the tin soldier, the very same which had been lost up in the old man's room and had been hidden among old wood and rubbish for a long time, till it sunk into the earth, where it must have been for many years. And the young wife whipped the soldier first with a green leaf, and then with a fine pocket handkerchief, which smelled out such beautiful perfume. And the tin soldier felt as if he was recovered from a fainting fit. "Let me see him," said the young man, when he smiled and shook his head and said, "I can scarcely be the same, but it reminds me of something that happened to one of my tin soldiers when I was a little boy." And when he told his wife about the old house and the old man and of the tin soldier, which he had sent across because he thought the old man was lonely, and he related the story so clearly that tears came into the eyes of the young wife for the old house and the old man. "It is very likely that this is really the same soldier," said she, "and I will take care of him and always remember what you have told me. But some day you must show me the old man's grave." "I don't know where it is," he replied. "No one knows. All his friends are dead. No one took care of him, and I was only a little boy." "Oh, how dreadfully lonely you must have been," said she. "Yes, terribly lonely," cried the tin soldier. "Still it is delightful not to be forgotten." Delightful indeed, cried a voice quite near to them. No one but the tin soldier saw it. It came from a wreck of a leather with hung in tatters. It had lost all its gildings and looked like wet earth, but it had an opinion, and it spoke it was. "Gilden with fate and damp weather, to endure there's nothing like leather." But the tin soldier did not believe any such thing.